everyone, welcome back to my channel for a brand new mystery with Mollie. If you are new around here, if you have never seen my face on your screen before, then hi, my name is Mollie and I post true crime videos like this every single week. So if you think that that is something that you might want to stick around for, then please do subscribe and don't forget to switch on the little notification bell so that YouTube will let you know whenever I post a new video. This week we are going to be talking about the solved case of Tiana Notice. She was a young woman from Connecticut who was tragically murdered on Valentine's Day back in 2009. Very quickly after Tiana's death, a suspect was arrested on suspicion of her murder. There really was no kind of investigation here to try and work out who the perpetrator was. Everyone knew immediately who had killed her, because in the lead up to her death, this individual had been harassing and stalking Tiana relentlessly, which was constantly being reported to the police. The police were fully aware of this, so then how could this still have happened? Why wasn't action taken by the authorities in order to protect her from the man that would eventually go on to end her life? Join me as we delve into the heart-wrenching case of Tiana Notice. But quickly before we get into the case, please listen carefully to the following. This video is about the murder of a young woman and it involves heavy themes such as domestic abuse and violence, as well as stalking and harassment. Viewer discretion is advised. So for this week's case, we are going back about 15 years now to February of 2009 in the town of Plainville, which is located in Hartford County in the state of Connecticut in the US. And this is Tiana Angelique Notice. She was a 25-year-old woman who lived in Plainville. Tiana was born on the 4th of February 1984. Her father was named Alvin Notice and her mother was named Kathy Lewis. And according to sources, Tiana had three half-brothers. Their names were Christian, Tyrell and Tyrone, and she also had a stepsister named Natasha too. It would appear as though Tiana had a pretty normal, happy childhood. She was said to absolutely love music. She spent a lot of time singing in choirs as a kid. According to one source, she would even write her own songs and poetry. She wrote so many poems. She loved to sing in church. Her family were very religious and avid churchgoers, and therefore Tiana was very religious herself. Her loved one said that God meant everything to Tiana. The most important things in her life was God and her family and friends. And Tiana was also an incredibly intelligent girl growing up, and when I say intelligent, I really mean it. She was just so academic and one of those people that was just naturally very smart. Her father Alvin said that it was when Tiana was probably around like 6 years old when he and the rest of the family realised just how gifted and special Tiana was, and she was so intelligent in school that her teachers had to keep moving her to higher classes because she was learning at such a faster pace than all of her classmates. In fact, when she was in her final year of high school, at the same time as that, she had also started her first year of college studies. She was doing them both at the same time, which is just wild. I mean, I cannot even comprehend how much work that must have been for her to take on, but she loved it. Eventually, Tiana became a student at the University of Hartford and she graduated from university with a degree in political science, and she also did graduate work in public policy communication and paralegal studies. It was her ultimate goal to have a career in either politics or law, and her mother Kathy in particular had always envisioned her daughter being a lawyer. She thought that her daughter would have been amazing at that because Tiana loved a good debate, she loved voicing her opinions. Simply put, she loved arguing with people. Not in a bad way, but like she loved just arguing her point on things. She loved to have the last word, and obviously we know that she was very bright, so she really would have made a fantastic lawyer. By 24 years old, Tiana was working towards getting her master's degree, and as well as this, she also got a job working at another university as an admissions counsellor. So as you can imagine, she was an incredibly busy woman. Between her uni classes and her job, she had a pretty jam-packed schedule, but that didn't stop her from doing, you know, fun things like hanging out with her friends and dating, I guess. By the fall of 2007, Tiana Notice was a single woman looking to meet new people. However, prior to this, she had been in a pretty serious relationship with a guy named Robert Dennis. Tiana and Robert dated in college, and he was literally described as being her college sweetheart. They were just always besotted with each other. They were together for about 5 years in total, and they were so in love. However, their relationship came to an end when Robert decided to leave Connecticut and move to the state of Virginia because he was going to be attending university there to get his degree. And I think what happened is that ultimately both he and Tiana decided that it would just be too hard to continue their relationship long distance. As much as they loved each other, they just thought that it would be too difficult, and they both decided that the best thing to do, whilst they were both at this stage in their lives where they were getting their degrees, was to separate, at least for the time being. I think they always knew that they would probably eventually find their way back to each other because their love was so strong, but yeah, for the time being, whilst they were going to be living so far apart, it just seemed like the sensible decision for them at the time to split. So yeah, Robert went off to Virginia, and like I said, by the fall of 2007, Tiana was a single woman. And it was in October of 2007 when Tiana started speaking to a new man, actually through MySpace. Obviously, this was around the time when MySpace was incredibly popular, and in October of 2007, randomly one day, this new guy popped up in her MySpace messages. It was a guy named James Carter Jr., and he was 27 years old, so only a couple of years older than Tiana. They started chatting, messaging each other quite often, and he seemed really nice and friendly. And at the time, Tiana's friends said that she wasn't really looking for anything serious. She'd only recently split up with her college sweetheart Robert, and she was still pretty heartbroken from that, I think. So she wasn't looking to get into another serious relationship anytime soon. But she did really like chatting to this James Carter Jr. She felt that they had some stuff in common, and she thought that he was really good looking in his pictures, and he thought the same of her. He would always compliment her in their messages, telling her that she was attractive and beautiful. And so eventually Tiana agreed to go on a date with James Carter. She made sure that the first time they met, it was in a public place because, you know, she had only been speaking to him online so far. So I think they went out for food to a restaurant or something, and the date seemed to go really well. James seemed, again, very nice and friendly, and he and Tiana got along just as well in person as they did through online messages. They obviously chatted about themselves, their lives, and James actually seemed to be a very successful young man. He told Tiana that he had his own house, he was a property owner, he said that he was a college graduate, and that he was now working for this big insurance company. He said that he worked as a manager and executive, so he earned quite a good amount of money. And he also told Tiana that he was very religious too, and he loved going to church, which was very important to Tiana. As we know, she was also very religious, so she loved that they were similar in that sense too. In all honesty, James Carter almost seemed to be the perfect guy for Tiana, and so eventually they started dating. They began a relationship, and in the beginning this seemed to be, well, the perfect relationship. Again, James was nice and kind and very generous. He would always buy Tiana gifts. For example, at one point he even brought her a phone, I think just a brand new phone out of the blue. Another time he brought her new tyres for her car because she needed new tyres, so he wanted to surprise her and pay for them himself. So yeah, overall things seem to be going really, really well between them, but this happy relationship didn't actually last very long, because about 3 months into the relationship, in early 2008, Tiana discovered that James Carter was actually about to go to prison. He had been sentenced to 5 months in prison for the domestic abuse of an ex-girlfriend of his, something which Tiana had absolutely no idea about. He hadn't told her about any of this, and it was upon learning this when Tiana also discovered that this wasn't the first time her boyfriend had been involved with the law. He had a criminal record which included crimes such as assault. As you can imagine, Tiana was furious when she discovered all of this, discovered that the guy she had been dating was not who she thought he was, not who he claimed he was. However, it seems as though when Tiana confronted James about what he had done, about the domestic abuse charge against his ex-girlfriend, he tried to make out like actually he was the victim in all of this. He claimed that his ex had falsely accused him of domestic abuse, and he told Tiana this story about how one day after he and his ex broke up, she tried to literally break into his house because she wanted to speak speak to him. She demanded to speak to him because she wanted them to get back together. But he didn't want that, and so eventually they started arguing, and at one point during this argument, the police were called, or they turned up at the scene, and James was the one who was arrested and eventually charged. And he said that he believed that the only reason the police arrested him was because he was a black man. His arrest was racially motivated, and that was it. He claimed that there was no truth in the allegations. He was trying to manipulate Tiana, like I said, make her think that he was actually the victim in all of this. And it does appear as though eventually she did believe him. Perhaps she was slightly blinded by her feelings for him, and so she decided to give him the benefit of the doubt. She believed in second chances, and so whilst he spent those 5 months in prison, she decided to stay in contact with him. She would write James letters and visit him occasionally, and when he was released from prison in mid-2008, they started seeing each other again. However, once again, it wasn't long before the relationship turned sour, because once again, Tiana discovered a load of lies that James Carter had told her. She actually discovered that he was a father. He had a son, which he had never told her about before. When they first got together, he lied and told Tiana that he didn't have any children and that he was looking for the right woman to settle down and start a family with. But he had already started a family. He had a son with another woman. But the lies didn't stop there. Tiana also found out that he had lied about his house. Remember, he said that he owned his house? Well, that was a lie. He didn't. He lied about being a college graduate. He hadn't actually graduated from college. He didn't, in fact, have a job working as a manager or executive for this big insurance company. He had completely lied to Tiana about pretty much every aspect of his life, probably to reel her in. He thought that telling her all of these lies would make her fall for him, and I guess it worked to an extent. She really was impressed by everything that he had told her, until of course she discovered that it was all just a load of crap, and she probably started to realise that if he can lie that easily, then what other lies has he told her? She probably realised that that story he had told her before he went to prison about being falsely accused of domestic abuse was fake as well. He wasn't the victim that he had portrayed himself out to be. Sources also state that Tiana suspected that James had started being unfaithful to her upon being released from prison. He was cheating. And so because of this and all of the other reasons, she decided to split up with James Carter Jr. for good. She ended their relationship. She didn't want to be with a compulsive liar. Tiana officially split with James about a year after they first began seeing each other, towards the end of 2008. However, James Carter was not prepared to let Tiana go. He did not want the relationship to end, and so even after they split, he would not leave Tiana alone. He would constantly try to get in contact with Tiana and speak with her, probably trying to convince her to change her mind and take him back. He started following her and literally stalking her. Sources state that he would follow her to the grocery store. He would follow her when she was out with her friends. He just would not let her get on with her life. And so not long after the relationship ended, in January of 2009, Tiana went to the Plainville Police Department and she filed a temporary restraining order against her ex-boyfriend, James Carter. And James's response to this wasn't to finally back off and leave her alone. No, no, no. Instead, he actually decided to retaliate and do the exact same thing to her. He decided to also go to the police and file a restraining order against Tiana. And when this went to court, both of them were given 6-month-long restraining orders against each other. They were not allowed any contact with each other or to go near each other for 6 months. And just as a side note, this wasn't the first time that James Carter had gone to the police about Tiana. Prior to filing this restraining order and before they broke up, up, he apparently went to the Plainville police and basically said that during an argument, Tiana had become violent towards him. He was accusing her of physically assaulting him, which, as you can probably guess, the police found absolutely no evidence of. He didn't have any injuries on him whatsoever to back up his claims, and so, of course, they didn't act on this. Tiana wasn't arrested or anything. And as well as that, after they broke up, obviously Tiana collected all of her belongings from James's house. She asked one of her friends to go with her so that she didn't have to go on her own, and when James came to Tiana's house to collect his belongings, he was accompanied by a police officer. He had gone to the police asking for them to come with him when he picked up his stuff from Tiana's house. It was almost like, once again, he was trying to make himself out to be the victim by reporting Tiana to the police for domestic violence and getting an officer to come with him to pick up his stuff, filing a restraining order against her shortly after she filed one against him. All Tiana wanted was him out of her life for good, and he had clearly decided that he was going to make this breakup as difficult as he possibly could. And then shortly after both restraining orders were filed, all of a sudden, Tiana began receiving these threatening emails from, well, a complete stranger. They claimed to be from a woman named Jessica Banderas, and Jessica said in the emails that she was James's new girlfriend. For 2 days, these emails were non-stop, and they basically consisted of this Jessica telling Tiana to stop lying about James harassing and stalking her, and Jessica telling Tiana that she was going to lose everything if she didn't. A couple of quotes from Jessica's emails are, "Trust me, baby girl, you are going to lose everything. As God is my witness, punishment is on the way, so be prepared. And also, you will have bad luck, you hear me? Remember this email when karma bites you in the ass." And I think very quickly Tiana realised that these emails were not from James's new girlfriend, Jessica. He probably didn't even have a new girlfriend. He was clearly the one who was sending these emails pretending to be someone else. And so on the 13th of January 2009, Tiana went to the Plainville police again. She showed them these emails from James or Jessica because they clearly showed that he was violating the terms of the restraining order by contacting her. However, unbelievably, the police did nothing about this really. They actually told Tiana that they didn't consider the emails to be threatening, and that unless she had concrete proof that they were in fact sent by James, they wouldn't do anything. And so, of course, the contact from James did not stop there. He continued to send her emails and text messages. He would try and call her. He would wait outside of her apartment and follow her. And Tiana was reporting all of these incidents. She was constantly going to the police and telling them about all of this, and they did nothing. Tiana's mother, Kathy, said that the police were just not taking her daughter seriously at all. It was clear to Tiana that the officers just didn't believe her, and so they didn't bother doing anything, which meant that James could just continue with his stalking and harassment of her. And when he would find out that Tiana had been going to the police about him, once again, just like with the restraining order, he would retaliate and do the same. On the 31st of January 2009, James went to a police station in his town. He lived in Bloomfield in Connecticut, and he went to his local police station with this printed out letter or flyer. It had a picture of Tiana on it and a phone number. It claimed to be from Tiana, and it basically said that she still loved James and that she wanted to talk to him. So he went to the police with this letter basically saying, look, she's tried to contact me as well. She's violating my restraining order against her. So the police contacted Tiana about this letter, which she strongly denied sending. She said that she had never seen that letter before, nor did she make it and send it to James. I mean, it was obvious, again, just like the emails, that James had made it himself. If Tiana was going to send James a letter, why the hell would she have typed it up on a computer and included a picture of herself on it? That's just not something that anyone would do. Clearly, James had done it, again, just to retaliate. It was like tit for tat. He knew that Tiana had been going to the police about him because he was still harassing her despite the restraining orders, and so he decided to do the same, even though she hadn't been trying to contact him him at all. And this may have possibly been part of the reason why the police weren't taking Tiana seriously, because of the fact that James was also reporting her. And so to the police, it was kind of just like, well, we're just in the middle of these squabbles between these two ex-lovers. But if the police had actually bothered to properly look into these reports and not just dismiss them so quickly, they would have discovered that there was truth behind Tiana's accusations and absolutely none behind James's. I cannot even imagine how mentally draining and upsetting this must have been for Tiana, not just because of everything that James was doing to her, his refusal to just leave her alone, but also feeling like the police didn't even believe what she was telling them about the harassment and therefore not doing anything to help her. It's awful. But thankfully, someone who was very much there for Tiana during this horrendous time in her life was her ex-boyfriend, Robert Dennis, her old college sweetheart. I believe it was around the end of 2008, after Tiana broke up with James, when she and Robert started speaking again. And it almost seems like as soon as they were back in contact, it was like nothing had changed between them. That love that they once shared for each other was still very much present. Their feelings for one another were still incredibly strong, and so they reignited their relationship. They just knew that they were soulmates. They were meant to be together. And so one day, whilst they were actually chatting on the phone, Robert effectively asked Tiana to marry him. I mean, I don't think he planned to do it on the phone, and this wasn't like a full-on proposal, but the topic of marriage came up, and they both said that that was something that they really wanted. They wanted to marry each other. And so Robert fully intended to propose to Tiana one day soon. He was going to go out and buy a ring, and he actually planned to propose on Valentine's Day in 2009, the 14th of February. So he was very excited about that. But I mean, amongst the excitement, Robert was also feeling very concerned for Tiana because of everything that she was dealing with her ex, James Carter Jr. As you can imagine, when James Carter found out that Tiana had gotten back together with Robert Dennis, he was angry, because in his mind, Tiana was his. He didn't want her to be with anyone else. He wanted her to be with him. And so he was furious when he discovered that Robert was back on the scene. And on the 7th of February 2009, Tiana went to her car, which was parked outside of her apartment, and she found that not one, but all 4 of her car tyres had been slashed. And of course, she knew instantly who had done this. It had to be James. This was his way of taking his anger out on her for getting back together with Robert, vandalising her car tyres, the tyres that he had previously brought for her. Once again, she went straight to the police about this, and once again, nothing was done. The police basically said that they couldn't arrest him for this because there wasn't, I guess, any evidence that James was the one who slashed the tyres. It wasn't like she had caught him on camera doing this, although hopefully she was about to. You see, it was following her car tyres being slashed when Tiana actually went to her father Alvin for help. And it turns out that prior to this, Tiana hadn't really told many people in her life the true extent of what had been going on with James Carter, about how he had been harassing and stalking her. I don't think many people in her family had even met him in real life, to be honest. Who knows, maybe Tiana felt a bit embarrassed about what was going on. Not that she had anything to be embarrassed about. Maybe she felt as though she was protecting her family by not telling them about what was going on. She didn't want them to worry about her. But like I said, it was when her car tyres were slashed when I think she realised that she needed them. She needed their help and support, because now he wasn't just trying to contact her constantly and following her. Now this abuse had turned physical, I suppose, and violent. I mean, taking a knife to someone's tyres is an incredibly violent act if you think about it. So if he can do that, then what else is he capable of doing? So yeah, Tiana called her dad Alvin. She told him about everything that had been going on, about the tyres, and Alvin, of course, very worried for his daughter, he decided to install a CCTV camera outside of his daughter's apartment. This camera pointed towards the parking lot outside where her car was always parked, in the hopes that the next time James Carter returned to Tiana's apartment, whether that be to stalk her or again damage her car, they would have him on tape. And they could take this tape straight to the police. It would be the concrete proof that they needed to show the police that Tiana was being truthful and that James really was the only one who was violating the terms of the restraining orders. Just 5 days after her car tyres were slashed, on the 13th of February 2009, James began attempting to contact Tiana again, this time while she was at work. As she was working at her job as an admissions counsellor, one of her co-workers transferred a phone call over to Tiana. The person on the phone was asking to speak with her. That person was James Carter Jr. He had rang Tiana's place of work numerous times that day in an attempt to get through to her. On the phone, he apparently started telling Tiana about how he was really struggling to find work because no employers were hiring him due to the fact that Tiana had filed a restraining order against him. It was like he was trying to get Tiana to feel sorry for him, as if she ever would after everything that he had put her through and was still putting her through. So Tiana was having none of it, and she told James on the phone to just leave her alone and to stop calling her at work. Once again, that was yet another violation from James of the restraining order, and I think this time Tiana had a little glimmer of hope that maybe the police would finally take her seriously, because she effectively had a witness, that co-worker that transferred James's call over to her. So maybe now, with a witness account from her co-worker, the police would actually do something. And so once again, she went to the Plainville police and she reported this. But apparently the Plainville police told her that they couldn't technically do anything about this because, you see, Tiana worked in a university in the city of Waterbury in Connecticut, which is about 19 miles away from Plainville, where she lived. And the Plainville police said that because this incident happened while she was at work, it was for the Waterbury Police Department to deal with and take a report of. She would have to go to them. And so she did. She walked into the Waterbury Police Department that same day. She even had with her a witness statement from that co-worker about James's constant phone calls to her place of work, as well as a copy of the restraining order that she had against him. However, according to sources, the officer that she spoke to apparently didn't believe that the restraining order was real. They essentially accused Tiana of faking this restraining order paperwork, and they told her that no, she would have to go back to the Plainville police and have them fax over a copy of the restraining order before they could file her report. I mean, what the hell? I'm literally lost for words at the police's actions in this case. But Tiana did what they said. She asked the Plainville police to fax over a copy of the restraining order to the Waterbury Police Department, and even Tiana's mother, Kathy, contacted the police following this. She rang them asking why no one was helping her daughter, why James Carter wasn't being punished for constantly violating the restraining order. And this is absolutely outrageous, but they basically told Kathy that Tiana would have to get back in touch with them in a couple of days, because at the time that she rang, no one was apparently around to deal with her case. No detectives were working. I believe Kathy rang on the evening of Friday the 13th of February, the same day as the phone calls to Tiana's work, and apparently that was President's Day weekend. So like I said, she was informed that no one was working, no one was around in the police station to deal with it. So Tiana would just have to wait. She would have to wait until after the weekend. If only they knew that by that time it would be too late. Later that same evening, the evening of the 13th, when Tiana returned to her apartment in Plainville at approximately 7:20, she found a handwritten note that had been slipped underneath her front door. It read, "Tiana, forgive me. I never cheated on you. And if you don't believe me, read Psalms 32, please. If I'm lying, may God take my life. I never ever cheated. Forgive me for everything else I have done." The note wasn't signed, but of course Tiana knew that it was from James, and instantly, once again, she had a little glimmer of hope because of the CCTV camera that her dad had installed. She thought, great, I've got evidence. She would have video evidence of James Carter coming to her apartment and putting this note under her door. However, when she checked the footage, she realised that very frustratingly, the camera hadn't actually been recording at the time that he would have dropped this note off. The tape had run out, which is just awful. It must have been shattering for Tiana when she realised that it hadn't been recording recording, and so she therefore didn't have video evidence. She still immediately reported this to the police regardless, and apparently the police tried to arrange for James Carter to come down to the police station and give a handwriting sample so that his handwriting could be compared to the writing in the note. Now, the day following all of this was obviously Valentine's Day, the 14th of February 2009, the day that Tiana's college sweetheart Robert planned to propose to her. He had brought the ring and everything, he was all ready to do it, but tragically he was actually really ill at the time with flu, and so he couldn't propose. This was going to be one of the most special events in their lives, so understandably he didn't want to be sick when he did it, and so he had to cancel. And he told Tiana on the phone that he would see her the following weekend instead, because she was due to come over to Virginia, where obviously he lived, and so he was going to propose then instead. So sadly, Tiana's Valentine's Day plans with Robert were cancelled, but little did she know that her ex-boyfriend James Carter had plans of his own for that day, which involved Tiana. She tried to just carry on with her day as normal, however, when she checked her email inbox, she discovered that once again James had made contact. He had sent her several emails basically just begging her to speak to him, begging her to call him, and in one of the emails he pleaded with her not to tell the police about these emails, because he knew that he shouldn't have been sending them due to the restraining order. But obviously she ignored that and she took them straight to the Plainville police, and for once Tiana left that police station feeling a sense of relief, because the police assured her that yes, this was evidence that he had violated the terms of the restraining order, and so they told Tiana that they were going to do something now, they were going to arrest him now. So she left feeling like finally that weight had been lifted off of her shoulders. Finally the police were actually going to act and apprehend James Carter Jr. However, they didn't. Instead of going ahead and arresting him, the Plainville police actually just called him. They rang James later that day and they told him that they knew about these recent emails that he had sent Tiana, and they said that if they could confirm that it was definitely him that had sent them, he would be arrested. Which is the absolute worst thing that the police could have done, was to phone him about the emails, because James Carter now knew that Tiana had gone to the police about them, something which he had specifically asked her not to do, and he was enraged by this, and this rage is what led him to do what he did next. Shortly after James Carter received this call from the police on the evening of the 14th of February, Tiana was in her car and she was driving towards her apartment. Now, from what I can gather, she hadn't been staying at her apartment since I think either her tyres were slashed or the note from James was slipped under her door, because understandably she didn't feel safe staying there on her own, so she was staying with her mum Kathy. But on this particular evening, the evening of the 14th, she decided to stop by her apartment before heading to her mum's to grab some of her laundry so that she could do that at her mum's house, wash her clothes. She arrived at her apartment at around 9:40 p.m. She got out of her car and she walked towards her front door, completely unaware that her ex-boyfriend and stalker James Carter Jr. was hiding nearby, and he was armed with a knife. He had been lurking outside of her apartment in the darkness, just waiting for her to return home, waiting for his opportunity to attack. Before she even made it to her front door, James Carter ran up to Tiana, and in an act of revenge for reporting him to the police about the emails, he raised his knife and he began stabbing Tiana with it repeatedly. Over and over again, he plunged this knife into Tiana's body, and of course she immediately started shouting and screaming, and she began fighting for her life, doing everything that she could to get away from him. After stabbing Tiana about 20 times with this knife, James Carter fled the scene, and despite her horrific injuries, Tiana actually managed to grab her phone and dial 911 for help. And there are audio clips of her 911 call online. I won't be playing them in this video video, but they are available online, and they are just heartbreaking to listen to hear the terror and the fear in her voice. She says to the dispatcher, "I'm bleeding to death. My ex-boyfriend just stabbed me to death." Also heard on the phone call are some of Tiana's neighbours. They rushed straight to her as soon as they heard her screams. They actually saw James Carter speeding away in his car, and they stayed with Tiana whilst the ambulance was on the way. One neighbour is heard on the call saying to Tiana, "You're not going to die, you're not going to die." Due to the extent of her injuries, it wasn't long before Tiana lost consciousness, and when she arrived at the hospital, doctors began working desperately hard to save her life, but to no avail. Tiana had lost way too much blood, which caused her heart to stop, and the doctors even hand massaged her heart to try and get it going again, but it didn't work. And by the time her parents, Alvin and Kathy, arrived at the hospital, 25-year-old Tiana Notice had been pronounced dead, brutally killed by her sadistic stalker ex-boyfriend James Carter, who it was determined she had gone to the police about in the 6 weeks before her death 33 times. 33 times she went to the authorities telling them that this man was harassing her and following her and slashing her tires, sending her threatening emails, leaving her handwritten notes. 33 times she told them that she was scared of him, and nothing was done in order to protect her, even when this man has a history of domestic violence against another ex-girlfriend, and yet still no action was taken, meaning that James Carter Jr. was free to carry out this vicious murder. Of course, the police knew immediately exactly who had committed this horrific crime. They knew that it was James. I mean, Tiana had even identified him in the 911 call. She said that her ex-boyfriend had stabbed her to death. Carter did try to go on the run immediately after he fled the crime scene, during which he called his brother and told him about what he had just done, and luckily he didn't get very far. Later that very same night, only about an hour after Tiana was pronounced dead, James Carter Jr. was found by the police and arrested on suspicion of murder. And as well as being charged with murder, he was also charged with the violation of a restraining order. Finally, when it came to his court proceedings, he actually decided to plead not guilty, despite the huge amount of evidence there was linking him to the crime, like Tiana's 911 call in which she said that he was the attacker, the neighbours seeing him speeding away in his car from the crime scene, the fact that he had been harassing and stalking her for months, his confession to his brother on the phone, the CCTV camera outside of Tiana's apartment, it was recording that night, and James Carter Jr. was captured on it. It was also found that Tiana's blood was on his clothing. I mean, there was a significant amount of evidence against him, and yet he pleaded not guilty. But he didn't deny killing Tiana. As I understand it, he accepted that he was responsible for her death, but according to reports, his defense team argued during his trial that he was very mentally ill. He was suffering a mental breakdown at the time of Tiana's death due to their relationship falling apart and the stress of being unemployed, and so because of his mental health, they argued that he couldn't be held responsible for his actions. And they also argued that he in no way planned this crime. He just snapped and lost control in the moment, which of course the prosecution strongly refuted. And when his trial came to a close in October of 2011, about a year and 8 months after the crime, James Carter Jr. was found guilty of the murder of Tiana Notice, as well as the restraining order charge. He was convicted of that too, which he received 5 years for. And for Tiana's murder, he was sentenced to 60 years in prison, the maximum sentence that one can be given for murder in Connecticut. So it is highly, highly unlikely that he will ever make it out of prison. Thank goodness. Obviously, it goes without saying that Tiana was so incredibly let down by the police in this case. Her cries for help help were basically just ignored by them. And so in the aftermath of her murder, her parents, Kathy and Alvin, really started campaigning for change. They wanted to see a change in the system, a change in the way that cases like Tiana's, stalking and domestic abuse cases, are handled by the police, so that no family would have to go through what Tiana's family were going through after her murder, a murder that could have been prevented. They launched the Tiana Notice Foundation, which aims to spread awareness of violence towards women, and with the help of Connecticut State Senator May Flexer and Karen Jarmock, the head of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence, the laws in Connecticut, and I believe other states too, were tightened to prevent domestic violence homicides. Through their work, they were able to set up this GPS monitoring system, which means that domestic violence offenders that are considered high risk, like James Carter, would be required to wear a GPS, which would obviously track their location. And if the tracker determines that the abuser is close by to their victim, or like the victim's house or something, the victim will be notified and made aware, which is just incredible. And I'm sure that the GPS system alone has saved so many lives. I mean, if you think about it, if it was around before Tiana's murder, perhaps her death could have been prevented just from that alone. If James Carter Jr. had been wearing a GPS tracker on the night that he intended to kill Tiana would have been notified that he was near her apartment, and she never would have gone back there to fetch her laundry. In addition to that, thanks to Alvin and Kathy's work, Connecticut introduced domestic violence lethality assessment, which basically means that when someone goes to the police reporting domestic abuse, the police are required to carry out this assessment and ask specific questions in order to determine how high of a risk the abuser poses to the victim, if there could be a risk that they might try to murder their victim. Following Tiana's death, it was determined that a family court of New Britain, and not one but 3 police departments in Connecticut, had failed to protect Tiana. So this was obviously the Plainville Police Department, as well as the Bloomfield Police Department and the Waterbury Police Department too. All 3 of those police departments had been made aware of James's harassment and stalking of Tiana, and none of them acted in a way to keep her safe from him. And in April of 2014, officers with the Waterbury Police Department and the Plainville Police Department in particular were found negligent by a jury in regards to their handling of Tiana's case. And as a result of this, Tiana's family received a settlement of $10 million in damages, and the family used this money to help set up and fund the Tiana Notice Foundation. I will leave a link to the Tiana Foundation website in the description box if anyone would like to read more about them, as well as a link to their donation page if you would like to make a contribution to help fund the work that they do in Tiana's name. The foundation is an amazing legacy to Tiana. And that is it for this case. That concludes the case of Tiana Notice. An incredibly heartbreaking and frustrating case. Whilst I was researching this one, it actually reminded me a lot of the Shana Grice case from the UK, which I covered last year. She was a young woman also tragically murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who, much like James Carter, stalked and harassed her relentlessly in the lead up to her death. And just like Tiana, Shana went to the police about him a number of times and nothing was done. No action was taken by the police in order to protect Shana, which meant that her abuser was free to go on and kill her. I find cases like this, like Shana's and Tiana's, really hard to cover, to be completely honest, because I just feel like I'm always lost for words. I can't find the words to even describe the level of anger and disappointment in the police that I feel when relaying their stories. It's just so bitterly sad that these girls could have been saved. Their murders could have been prevented if the people that were supposed to protect them did more, did their jobs. But you know, education is key, and I do believe that one of the ways to prevent cases like this from ever happening again is to spread awareness of them, spread awareness of these victims' stories. So thank you so much for watching this video all the way through. If you would like to check out the video I made about Shana Grice's case and learn more about her story, then I will leave a link to that in the description box. And if you have any suggestions of any other cases that you would like to see me cover cover on this channel, feel free to let me know in the comments. Or alternatively, I do have a case request form linked down below in the description box too. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I will see you again next week for another mystery with Mollie. Bye.